So it's mid-December, and I think it's the perfect moment for a landscape photographer like myself to take a look back to old photos that I took during this year and to select a few that I think are most, let's say, well composed and well crafted. I've selected a few photos and I want to talk about composition, editing, settings, and the reason behind taking those photos.
I will start with this photo from the drone, and as you can see, the development of the composition is taking this road, and it kind of evolves in the way a tree or a flower would grow, and this was the main reason for this composition. Now, I really liked how the road takes you into the fog. It kind of adds mystery. It kind of makes you wonder what could be there, and it also gives you a nice ending to the photo. In terms of the editing, I wanted to create contrast between the landscape and of course the road, and that is why the landscape is shifted towards orange and the road it's towards cyan and blue, just to have a difference between these two. In terms of setting, this doesn't really matter because we're talking about the drone. So let's move to the next photo, which is this one, shot on a Canon EOS 80D, and let's quickly see the settings. 40th of a second f11 and ISO 320. Now, as you can see, we are all at the moment of the sunset. This is in the Dolomite mountains. These are Trecime, and also I liked how the mountains are reflecting in this small pond or small lake. And as a composition, this photo was created with the idea that the eye will start to the left and kind of go up towards these mountains over here. This is a panoramic image of one of my foggy forests, and it's absolutely beautiful. And it's strange for me to say this because it's my own photo, but the settings are f11, ISO 100, and 0.8 seconds. The way I edited this photo is in warm tones, and my wish was to make you feel at home when you look at this photo. If for example, I would have chosen blue or cyan tones, you would have feel rejected by the forest. You would have feel that maybe it's creepy, or maybe it's a place from where you want to get out. But usually when you see warm tones, you want to go there, you want to be there. And as a composition, it's pretty simple. I'm using darker elements to the side and a simple trail that goes into the light. Of course, the way I positioned myself on the trail was very important, because as you can see over here, there is darkness, and over here there is light. So you need to pay close attention to what light does in the forest. Now, this one is another foggy forest, and again I used a darker frame, and the light comes from this side and falls onto this tree. The greens are slightly desaturated, just to not punch you in the eye if you want. And the settings f11, ISO 100, 0.5 seconds. So as you can see, you absolutely must have a tripod with you when you're photographing forest. The light is really low, and the camera, it's a Canon 6D. Another foggy forest with a vertical composition, and the reason for shooting vertical or horizontal comes from how the image develops. For example, in this case, the thing that I liked was the space between these trees, and because the trees are tall usually, or usually they are tall, I decided to make the frame in this way. Now we're switching to a sunrise in Foggy Mountains, Romania. This is a lake that is called Bula Lake, and we had some really beautiful clouds during the sunrise. Now, we didn't, when you are here, you don't see the sun actually rising, because you are kind of like in a bucket, and you have these ridges of mountains and the sun is over there. But you see the reflection of the sun and the reflection of the light from the sun. So that is the reason for photographing this. I wanted to capture the clouds that are being reflected here in the water. And of course we also have this triangle that it's almost always happening when you're photographing reflections. Let's take a look at the settings really quickly. So it's 1 second, f8 and ISO 100. This one is a waterfall from Slovenia, and the way I've composed it, as you can see, the image starts over here and kind of goes like this in a small diagonal that it's kind of breaking down over here. And the editing is again with the idea to create contrast between nature or surrounding elements and the actual element that I want your eye to stay on. And that is why this one is slightly desaturated, this one is shifted to a little bit of cyan, and it's much more brighter. And settings, 0.5 seconds, f11, ISO 100. Usually these are the type of settings that you're going to see in my photos: f11, f8, f16, ISO 100, and then the time that results. This one is from the Dolomites, and it's a vertical shot because the development of the photo, it's vertical. Now this is a small tower from Cinque Torri, and I used it as a foreground element, and it's not an element that gives you proportion to the photo because you also see it pretty big. If I also would have had a human figure, for example, over here, that would have been perfect because the human size compared to this tower is something like this. It's really small. So then at that moment you would have had the perfect let's say proportion of the mountains. But the reason for taking this photo is to have this one in darkness, then this one, and then this one. So there are three layers over here, and because of different light values on them, I can have a way to suggest depth much more better. I really like the fog. I really like how the light enters the fog. The light comes from the left because the sun is going to set, and in this location it sets to the left, and then in the end your eye goes to this big mountain in the background. Again, this was a different mountain, but kind of the same idea, where I used these two towers of stone with a different light value to kind of frame this one over here, which is in light. And I think this is a very simple way and very effective way to put your eye on a subject. As settings, f8, ISO 100 and 120th of a second. Another photo from the Dolomites, and I really liked how this one, or this peak, or this ridge, emerges from the mist and the clouds. And this is just a base for the photo, because I really like to start, for example, in darkness. I have darkness, light, and then I have darkness because of the subject, and then the image evolves again to the light and to the clouds. And as settings, f8, ISO 100, 125 of a second. Okay, this image I chose this image because of this small lake over here, this small pond. I think this small lake gives proportion and depth to the entire scene. From this image you would have think that this mountain is really behind this ridge over here, but it's not exactly like that. It's much further away. But I really liked how the cloud created a separation between these two areas, the foreground and then the background. And again, I'm having this pattern of darkness. In darkness I have a spot of light, but I have darkness, light, darkness, light, and then darkness in the clouds. And I think framing the photo inside darkness or having this alternation of light and darkness creates contrast and creates better separation. This is, for example, a much more complex composition of, in a way, the same image. The only thing is that I'm starting over here and then I'm going over here. Then I can stop your eye with this one over here, or you can go straight to this mountain. But if you stop over here, then you can go up, or you can take a look over here. But even if you look to this area of the photo, because this one is a little darker than this area, in the end your eye will eventually get here. It's a much more difficult composition. It can be tricky to create complex compositions. Sometimes there are people, for example, that could say, okay, this one, it's not exactly going that well, but for me it goes. I really like it, so that is why I chose it. This one is a sunset in the Dolomites, and I use the human figure over here to create proportion and to give a monumental feeling to the moment. Now, in terms of settings, again, f8, ISO 100 and 40th of a second. This is a sunrise moment at Lake Bled from Slovenia, and it's a very photographed place. That is why I chose to frame it like this, to have a different way of presenting the lake with the island and with the castle over there. It's a silhouette that it's unmistakable. And of course, again, after photographing that, I waited for the sunrise light to appear, and my luck was this boat that was on the lake and created a very beautiful moment. Without this boat, would have been a nice image, but this boat adds a lot. So let's take a look at the settings. 50th of a second f8, ISO 100. This is a cave that we shot during a workshop in the Apuseni Mountains in Romania. There are these huge caves, and it's called the Lost World over here. And the reason for selecting this photo is because of this figure, human figure over here, which gives proportion. And I must say, it doesn't give the true proportion of the place. I mean, you take a look at this this human figure and you can say, okay, it's big, but you actually don't realize how big it is, because from here it goes up on a really steep plane, and that is why I think you don't realize exactly how steep it is. This is a photo that I took when the first snow arrived in the mountains, and here it's a lonely tree and all this other between all these other trees, and he's yellow and bright. Of course it has a little bit of relatives here and there, but the fact that you look at it, you kind of, I don't know, you see it like a flame burning, like something that is completely different. Now in terms of settings, let's take a look quickly like this. 0.8 seconds, f11 and ISO 100, Canon 6D. This is one of my favorite images. It's a selfie. I took this one and it was a lucky shot. It was lucky because I had other selfies where I completely covered this, the sunlight, but here I literally had the sun shining half over my backpack, and I think this created a really nice image. I really like it, and the silhouette is seen very nice. But I say it again, it was a lucky shot. And in terms of settings, 80th of a second, f11, ISO 100. This image I really like. It's one of my favorite images because the idea when I shot it was that this branch over here looks like a claw, that it's kind of waiting to rip something, and here the red leaves are like, I don't know, stains of blood from something. It's a very graphical image. I think it very easily takes your mind to something violent, but again something mystical and something mysterious because of the fog. Now in terms of settings, this is 0.3 seconds, f6.3 and ISO 100. The reason for 6.3 over here is because I wanted to blur a little bit the trees in the background. I wanted to have your focus completely on this area. This is a diagonal composition. It's a sunrise on top of Chahlo Mountain, and it's kind of this slope over here. It's a reflection of this one over here, and the reason for including it was because of the beautiful light during these moments. Are sunrise in winter and sunset are really beautiful because the snow is catching all the colors. In terms of settings, 1/6 seconds, f8 and ISO 100. This is a photo from Tuscany, and we had the luck to have this fog, and then the fog breaks and you kind of see the top of the hill over here, and this alternation here, you have a wheat field and then the fog and then the top of the hill with the stronghold over here and then clouds again. It's like this one over here, it's like an island in a sea of fog and mist, and the base of the ground, it kind of looks like this thing over here. It's floating above the ground, and this was the reason for selecting this image. In terms of settings, very simple, 50th of a second, f11 and ISO 100. Now this one is a photo that I took inside the forest in midday bright light, and I had a luck to have some trees near this location, and the light came down only on these flowers, and I exposed for this flower, and then simply the image was created like this. Now in terms of settings, this one is ISO 640, 160th of a second and f8. The reason for this high ISO, I don't remember exactly, but usually when I'm using this high ISO for this subject, it's because of the wind, and I wanted to have a shorter exposure time just to freeze the motion of the flower. This is a photo again from Tuscany, and it's a very simple and clean photo, and I really liked how the clouds in a way mimic this island of green. And I really like in Tuscany there are these perfect islands of properties where you have the building, the landscape around it. It's like they are creating a landscape that it's perfect for being photographed. I can't wait to get in May again there. I have 2 workshops in the region, but the reason for photographing this property, it's the clouds. Clouds give it a really powerful feeling, and these are the settings. Now this is an urban composition. When I'm photographing urban environments, I really like to have different levels of depth or height, and I think this one does that perfectly, because we have the image starting over here, which is really high up, and because of this stone pillar, you realize that you're really up, and then you have this terrace, and then you have another terrace that it's way down. I think a silhouette over here would have worked perfectly, but it's good the way it is right now. So we have 500th of a second, f8 and ISO 640, and probably I was photographing by hand. Usually when I'm inside towns, I try to photograph by hand because you need to move quickly. It's very difficult with tourists and so on to use a tripod. And this is a sunset. This is the town of Pitigliano in Tuscany. It's a very beautiful town that is built on this rock formation over here, and we had the luck of this mist and this fog rising from this valley at sunset, And of course, when the lights of the town were lit, then the whole place was absolutely magical. And the settings are 2 seconds, f8 and ISO 100. I think I also did a longer exposure over here, trying to capture the flow of the fog. Now, this is a famous chapel in Tuscany. We had a really thick fog that morning, and because of that I positioned myself. I knew where the sun was going, and I also knew that once the sun reaches behind this chapel, you will see the sun rays because of the fog. That the fog enabled us to see these rays of sun. Again, in terms of settings, these are very simple. And this image over here, I think, again benefits from the power of the clouds. And the clouds are kind of going like this and takes your eye straight to this property over here. If these clouds were not present, I think this photo, I wouldn't took this photo.
That's it for today, and I hope you liked those photos. I hope you liked the tips that I gave you and the information. And if you want to tell me something, just use the comment section below. And until next time, keep on photographing, because it's the only way to get better. Bye bye.